I'm kind of just going to tone down a little bit about the whole advocacy and the challenge with it. Just a very brief example of how collaborations and uh, some of the points that some of you made about using celebrities or some of these other channels which have large access can be useful. So I'll just take a couple of seconds here. Talking about snow leopards, I'll obviously go with one global example, and Matt, if you are okay, I'll just request you to give the example of the campaign around the South Gobi
Sure.
initiative, right? Okay, so I hope you all know about the Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program. Now, it's a program that brings together governments and conservationists of 12 snow leopard range countries that you see listed up uh, on one platform to develop policy and take action. Now, the secretariat of this program is in Bishkek, but among many others, one of the key tasks is to coordinate workshops, meetings, conferences that bring together expertise and country representation from across the snow leopard range. But the other key task it has, or one of the mandate, is to inform the public, inform people about snow leopard conservation issues. And I'll just touch upon towards the end about how it becomes a useful tool. These are the number of partners. I mean, we're just so proud to have such a strong network of partners and collaborators with the GSLEP program. All these different players play one or more roles in supporting and making the GSLEP program what it is, or does just for its existence. Now, uh, among other things, the GSLEP program organizes summits and intergovernmental meetings and events, which are a great opportunity to engage with policymakers, but they also help us by giving a moment or a milestone to engage with global audiences. Now, the goal, remember here, and I'm going back a little bit to the last two sessions, the goal here is not to raise funds, but to mainstream conservation issues so that they become a priority for the policymakers. At this point in time, we're not specifically talking about a do or die situation like they were facing with the vultures. Here we're talking about the more the people know about snow leopards, uh, the more snow leopard conservation will slowly creep into becoming a priority for the governments as well. That's the really long-term vision or the goal we may have. And as Matt is going to talk about it later, this is where you're not reaching out to one country asking them to do something, but you're reaching out to a consortium of multiple countries, and a global audience is all right to reach out to them because there's no you're not likely to create uh, any effect where an exterior force is asking you to do something. You're all in it together. So that's why some of these larger multi-country programs at times become valuable. They they diffuse the resistance at times that many times people may have about being told what to do, um, because this is a collective action that's being taken rather than X country or X individual should do something because we are telling you to do so. It's a collective action, and that's where it works out. So in one very simple such effort in 2017, uh, the president of the Kyrgyz Republic had invited his counterparts from across the 12 snow leopard range countries, and we were looking for a means to engage um, with the global audiences. And thanks to some organizational partners and some celebrity support, we were able to get what looks like a big number, which is more than 200,000 signatures on a campaign urging the leaders of the snow leopard range countries to prioritize snow leopard conservation and to ensure whatever they had sort of planned in 2013 to cement those ideas and move it and give it more impetus. Now, with the right content, guidance, timing, and taglines, celebrities can really do a great job of spreading a message wide. The only key, and we're just, I think it's almost, sounding like a broken record, but the key is to keep in mind that that which audience who is connected to. It's knowing your audience absolutely is important. And I'll just mention one very brief incidence of how good awareness can become beneficial. And there are places within Mongolia, which is the second largest snow leopard range country. In the capital, there are people you would often meet who may say, "Oh, well, do we even have snow leopards in our country?" There are places in many snow leopard range countries where people may say, people will be surprised to know that there are snow leopards within their own country. Now, out of sight, out of mind, it's someone else's problem. Now, last year, when the COVID pandemic was raging, somewhere during the summer, we heard that some guy was trying to sell a snow leopard skin in a local market in Kyrgyzstan, and a shopkeeper happened to see it, see this guy walking around, trying to show it to someone, and he called the government agency, and this guy was captured. Now, the fascinating part here is that this person has, I mean, he's a local shopkeeper in one of the bazaars, but what's really fascinating is that that person had enough awareness that snow leopard skin is a no-no. You're not supposed to be buying or selling snow leopards. Now, how did that happen? And I think this is where some governments are doing incredibly good. Some countries are doing incredibly good. In Kyrgyzstan, every second person or every person you meet, you mention the word snow leopard, they all know, snow leopard, snake bars or ilbirs, they call it. They're all aware of it. There's been so much conversation about it. There's so much of folklore around it. There's so much of pride in being a country that has the snow leopard. It's a commonplace. Now, it turns out, by the way, just going back to that snow leopard skin story, it turns out, and it's a bit of a disconnected elements, but if you can kind of join them together, it's the skin that was captured. It had not a single incision. That entire skin was intact. Whoever taxidermied it was able to extract the entire tissue and bones without making a single incision on the skin. And when you go and speak about such specialist job to those who understand illegal wildlife trade, they were immediately able to point it to a certain region in the world, towards the West, where such skins are used or are created only on demand for a certain kind of use, which is more like keeping them as soft toys. And when that became clearer, it turned out that this person was ordered by someone from X country to provide him with this intact skin. Then COVID happened. No travel was happening at that time. This person, in desperation, tried to sell it to someone, eventually got caught because the local people are far more aware than probably a lot of people from other countries who come here. And that's how this just general awareness about these issues at times can become your eyes and ears in such in such situations where you don't really have much information about what might happen. So with that, I'd like to request Matt if you could kindly just quickly take us to that story about toasts.
Sure, with pleasure. I just got a message. I have to attend an urgent work call for my sort of day job in about 10 minutes, but I'll gladly speak about this before.
Perfect.
So many of you will have heard in some way of the Tost National Park in Mongolia. It's one of the country's prime snow leopard habitats. It's where the Snow Leopard Trust's long-term study on the ecology of these cats is situated and is happening. Oh, and we have Nadia on the call, so she's actually a much better person than I am to speak about this. I'm just going to keep it short and then ask Nadia to provide a much more thorough local perspective, because she was one of the key people in the campaign. So what happened was this area in Mongolia 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't under any sort of official protection. It's a place that's very remote, where you have a herder community that lives their lives there, and you have snow leopards, and you have the usual sort of conflicts that you tend to get with livestock depredation, etc. Snow Leopard Trust and Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation Mongolia have worked there for a very long time. I think it's going on more than a decade. It's almost 2 decades now, on community-based conservation programs. And this is key because it means that there's a long-standing relationship of trust between the community and the conservationists, of which Nadia, who is with us today, is one. So after several years of these conservation programs, there was a realization at some point that this entire area was threatened by mining. So Mongolia has a lot of minerals, and mining is a huge part of the industries, or the economy of Mongolia. And it turned out that this entire area of Toss Mountain, where the snow leopards live, was blanketed with so-called exploration licenses for mining companies, which are issued by the state and give them the right to kind of probe and dig and see if there's anything valuable in the ground. And if there is, they could then go on and extract it. So basically turn the mountain into a mine. Now, of course, that's a huge problem that destroys not only the snow leopard habitat and the lives of these animals, but also destroys the way of life of the local community, who are herders who depend on nature just as much as snow leopards do. And so the team suddenly saw itself faced with this big challenge of, how do we go from working with communities on a local level to mitigate conflict, to changing the minds of the governments in Ulaanbaatar, thousands of kilometers away, to not turn this entire region into a huge coal mine, basically. And what they did, I think, was exemplary of a great advocacy and communications campaign that we can all learn a lot from. And I think, Nadia, if you're okay with this, sorry to put you on the spot, instead of me recalling this from a distance and my very small role in it, would you be okay to give people a 5 or 10 minute just sort of overview of what your team did over the many years to achieve the protection for Tost, and then maybe Kostub, Justine, and myself can chime in with whatever comments and observations that we have.
Hello, Kostub, Matt, and Justine, everyone. And
hi, Nadia.
It's good to see you guys. I wasn't really prepared here to talk about
Sorry,
it.
if you don't want to, you don't have to. I just don't want to talk when you are here, who are the much better resource person for this.
No, please go ahead. And I'm sure, because this story is all Snow Leopard Trust know this story, and I think you are much better to, briefly, clearly say to the people. Rather, I may take it longer than you speaks, maybe.
Okay, so I'll give a 5-minute sort of summary, and then maybe all of you can add to it.
Do that. So if I can add a few more things if needed.
Okay, sounds great. So essentially, what happened was that Nadia's team, which is a local team of about 5 or 6 women who lead Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, they started the very complex process, first of all, of understanding the political and legislative process. What does it actually mean when there's a license given? Who gives the license? Who buys it? How long is it valid for? All of these things to really understand where the leverage points are, where the things are that can be done to change things. And what they found out with the help of lawyers and other experts was that the mining licenses would sort of become obsolete if they can achieve higher protection for Tost. So the first by this time, they had already achieved what's called a community protected area, where there's a certain level of protection from outside influence and the community is in charge. But this was not enough to grant, to override sort of the mining interests. So they identified the problem, the mines, and they identified the solution, which was, we need to get this area protected officially under state law as I think it's called a state nature reserve. So that's a very important first step, is understanding the process. What can actually be done on a legal level to ensure that this thing doesn't happen. And then the next thing they identified was, who are the people that can actually make this happen? Who in the government? Is it the president? Is it the prime minister? Is it the minister of mining? Etc. etc. Is it the local government versus the state government? And what they found, if I remember correctly, is that the first thing they needed to do was get the local government on board. The local community was already on board because they didn't want their home to be destroyed. But what they needed to do was get the local government on board to support this. So I don't know too much about how Mongolia is organized, but essentially it's first the region, then the bigger region, and then over that is the sort of federal structure. So they got the support of the local government and the local community. They also got the support of local lawmakers who are in parliament in the capital. And these local lawmakers proved critical because they helped get this sort of raised at a national level. They took the problem from their constituency to the capital. They brought it up in parliament. They suggested the law that was the change to the law that was necessary to turn Tost into a protected area. And they brought their colleagues from other parts of Mongolia to the area to show them, because Mongolia is a huge country, and as Kostub said before, not everyone is aware of snow leopards. If you're in the north of Mongolia, maybe this doesn't mean anything to you. So they brought people there to help build awareness among a very important key audience, which is other lawmakers. In parallel, they worked with media. They brought journalists to Tost from Ulaanbaatar. They showed them the area, they explained the problem, and they started a media campaign to not just raise awareness, but to get people to care enough that they start exerting political pressure. So suddenly you have more than one strain of action. You have the political, where you bring the lawmakers there, you have lawmakers putting proposals forward, and you have the media campaign, which was about creating pressure on the government to follow suit with these decisions. And at this point, I'm very sorry, I really quickly have to take this call. Kostub or Nadia, can you take it forward from here, because you know as much as I do about what happened next?
Oh, thanks, man. And
I'm sorry, I'll be back as soon as I can, but
please, that's fine. That's
all
fine.
right. Talk to you in a minute.
Okay, right. So Nadia, please go ahead. Over to you. What happened next?
I think I just briefly say the main stake we had is we having this long-term collaboration with these local people, because if we raise this issue to the government as a local NGO, this is, they wouldn't really consider it, because this issue must be raised by local people, who lives there. So we actually gives them some like what's their rights, how they can approach to the government, etc. So they basically do all these things. Those are helps by us. So if these local people didn't agree and we didn't have this, good relationship with these local people, I think it wouldn't be happening as Tost as a national reserve area. So I think that's I wanted to say. But this also this collaborating with this media, it was a new thing for us, because we don't really often works with these media people often. And that was also a new challenge for us, like how we should approach and how we should give these right messages to these media people. That was a new experience for us, so that we need to learn from there. But it's
Great.
still we learning, you know, because dealing with the media people is very difficult sometimes, because like if you say something, sometimes they, you know, make it a different context, and you have to make sure, double check what you have said or what you have posted. And I think that was one of my lessons learned.
Wonderful. And then that's really a very important point, Nadia, because in the first session, Matt also highlighted on the very fact that um, when you're communicating it to a media person, I think you have to make sure you're communicating everything as clearly, explicitly, and succinctly as possible. But then, of course, accidents happen, and we've all seen. I think the Seaspiracy is one of such examples where a story gets completely contorted. Okay, I'll quickly